topic is the establishment of new category, BRICS partner states. The agreements will be fixed in final declaration. There will be consolidated approaches reflected there. On 24th of October, there will be an outreach BRICS Plus format. There will host delegations from more than 30 developing countries, including those who preside in regional cooperation mechanisms, as well as executive structures of international organizations. The central topic will be BRICS and the Global South, building a better world together. The discussion will be devoted to topical issues of cooperation between the countries of the global majority and the increasing of the role in the development of solutions on international agenda. Hotspots in the Middle East will be another issue. Food security, energy security. I just recall on an approaching event of a very high importance on the international stage. I think that a lot of information has been already published. The administration of the president, the foreign ministry have been commented on this event. The representatives have been given interviews on different platforms, are given press conferences, briefings, given presentations, and answering questions. I think it was important to stress one more time what the main topics are. If you have questions, we'll be glad to answer them. The foreign minister will have a range of bilateral and multilateral meetings with our partners. We will publish additional information on our website later and on social media of the ministry. I should also point out that on October 17th and 18th, there will be the BRICS Business Council meeting and BRICS Business Forum. It's one of the main mechanisms of business cooperation within BRICS. The annual report will be approved. It will include ideas and initiatives of working groups of the Council. This document will be presented to BRICS heads of state in Kazan. On October 18th, there will be the BRICS Business Forum. It's a very useful platform for building up ties between representatives of business community. Panel discussions will be devoted to financial and investment cooperation, to international trade, logistic connectivity, agricultural business and its development, food security, energy transition, and technological cooperation in ESG implementation. ESG includes 3 criteria by which activities of a company are evaluated. There will be also award ceremonies, the contest of best practices, BRICS best practices, as well as BRICS women-led startups contest. The agenda also includes another event on October 30th, 31st. There will be World Congress of Compatriots Living Abroad. It is held under the slogan, Together with Russia. More than 400 leaders and activists of Russian diasporas from more than 103 countries will participate in this event. Russian Foreign Minister will participate in this event as well. Non-governmental organizations, religion representatives will also take part in this event. Journalists, scientists, etc. 3 plenary sessions, 5 thematic sessions. The most topical issues for our diaspora will be discussed: how to preserve traditional and family values, to preserve culture and history, to protect the Russian language, our education, to encourage youth to participate more, and relocation to our country. One of the central themes will be the preparation for the festivities held to mark the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War. The collective West propagate anti-Russian sentiments and Russophobia, but our diaspora is strong and unified. It is only through hard work and self-sacrificing that we achieve our goals. Our compatriots are prepared to continue joint efforts for the benefit of Russia and to build a more just world, and they see their contribution in this work. By Russia, we mean our country, our history, our common contribution into peace building, ensuring security, and preserving the legacy of civilizations. These are true, genuine values, not the false ones. Our compatriots want to continue to build up their ties with their historical motherland in this context. The accreditation for media is already open. The link will be available on our briefing section. From October 31st to November the 1st, there will be the Second International Conference on Eurasian Security held in Minsk. The Russian delegation will be led by Sergei Lavrov. Russian Foreign Minister will touch upon implementation of an initiative to form an equal and indivisible security architecture in Eurasia proposed by Russian President. He will also present Russian evaluations of current developments in the continent-wide security. Let's move to international agenda. Let's start with Ukraine. I usually start with Ukraine, but I cannot help but comment on what we saw on social media. I'm talking about yet another presentation of Zelensky. It's not a presentation, really. It's a kind of a comedy show that he shows everyone around the world. He lingered on in Kiev, went to the building of the Verkhovная Rada. There, he gave a presentation. He would talk with all his heart, but he doesn't have one. At Verkhovная Rada, Zelensky presented his Plan B. Plan A failed. Plan B failed as well. I think he has used all the letters, and now he has reached the last letter of the Russian alphabet. Ya is the last letter in the Russian alphabet. In the English alphabet, there will be Z. There was no live broadcast of this presentation because of security reasons. It's hard to guess what it was all about. Foreign visits to Kiev are always broadcast. All journalists tell about those visits online, but Zelensky doesn't feel secure in his own capital, especially at Verkhovная Rada. Maybe he was afraid there will be some deputy who will show citizen bravery and will do something to this man. On the other hand, that's his style. Why would Ukrainian citizens watch another slapstick comedy that is performed by the Kiev regime? Maybe they'll edit the show and will present it to the public without them having an opportunity to do justice. It's another comedy, as I said. As for the text voiced by Zelensky, it's not a plan. It's a number of unconnected slogans. It's a bloody spit on the lips of a neo-Nazi. It consists of 5 points. It's another hysteria about Ukraine joining NATO. Zelensky said it's going to be a testament of decisiveness and how Ukrainian partners see it in security architecture. Let me remind Zelensky. Kiev partners already demonstrated security architecture. They don't want to see it at all. And Ukrainian citizens, they see those citizens in graves. That's why they brought this clown to power, who would bring Ukraine as a state to grave and to kill as many Ukrainians as possible. The next point, strengthening of Ukrainian defense. Zelensky wants to do it by operations at certain places. Why wouldn't he name those places? How is he gonna do that? That's a good question. It's just ridiculous to attack the Russian aviation by using partners' help. So he is prodding NATO allies to direct conflict with our country. He insists on getting a green light to use long-range missiles to hit on inland Russian regions. Those who wrote the text understand to what consequences it will lead. The so-called plan contains of a deployment of a complex containing package, non-nuclear package, the increasing of sanctions against Russia, etc. There is an opinion that after the conflict, Ukrainian soldiers will use their experience to strengthen NATO defense in Europe. All these years, Zelensky has been begging the West to secure the security of Ukraine, but he now promises to help to ensure the European security. Where will this Ukrainian experience be used? In Lebanon, Syria, Afghanistan? Where is it applicable even? I'll answer these questions. For example, on the African continent, the Kiev regime has now demonstrated its so-called abilities. They've honed their terrorist skills, and they know pretty well that the West can use the Ukraine in this regard. Neither Washington nor London have always been happy to use terrorist units to destabilize the situation over the world. That's what we're talking about. By the way, the so-called plan contains 3 secret attachments. The Kiev regime allegedly shared them with its partners. The aforementioned, according to Zelensky, will lead to the fact that the hostilities will end not later but than the end of the next year. It's not plan of a victory put forward by Zelensky. It's a way to failure for Ukraine and its people. It's just for for getting more money and present one's terrorist capabilities. I think that Zelensky has proved to the whole world that he hates the Ukrainian people to such an extent that can only be characterized as Ukrainophobia. Now let us move to what's happening. Ukrainian Nazis continue their terror against Russian civilians. They hit with artillery and drones. October 8th to October 16th, more than 80 settlements in the Belgorod region suffered from 567 munitions and 267 drones. 30 civilians were injured, including a 2-year-old girl. In a city hospital, a civilian died, having implement on August 20th. A woman was injured as a result of a drone attack in the Ustinka settlement on October 12th. Residential houses, social, industrial, and agricultural infrastructure was damaged. The AFU used drones to scatter butterfly mines, which was the reason for one civilian vehicle explosion. Fortunately, there were no casualties. In the DPR, there were dozens of shellings by the AFU. They used 155mm artillery, including cluster type ones. They used MLRS, HIMARS MLRS, and drones. 25 people were injured, 5 died, including kids. A school, a shop, and a market were damaged. Those are locales were frequented by kids and civilians every day. On October 13th, in the in this kind of city, a child was seriously injured. He found a children's toy stuffed with an explosive close to a monument to Alexander Pushkin. Even an ISIS fighter wouldn't think of such a plot. In the Lysychansk city, as a result of an attack, 2 people died, 1 was injured. In the Crimean settlement, 4 civilians were injured. Investigative bodies of Russia record all those crimes, and everyone will answer the full extent of the law. Now let's talk about Ukrainian militants and mercenaries. Russia continues to receive accounts of war crimes committed by Ukrainian militants and foreign mercenaries in the Kursk region. There are accounts of one of the captured militants of abuse and killings of Benderites of a Russian POW. They shot him in the leg, then they shut him down, making a footage of him. They also recorded his last words to his wife. Russian combatants said that they found out a workshop in the combat area. They were producing drones in the Novoalexandrovka settlement in the Kursk region. They found an extracted gold teeth. They belonged allegedly to the killed local residents. We can directly couple it to what we are talking about all the time. That's their style, a neo-Nazi style. 80 years ago, as you remember, those people mocked civilians, killed them. They dismembered them. They took out the skin, teeth, other parts of the body. What other proof do you need to see what's happening?
The UN organization, OSCE, other international structures, human rights structures, they call themselves that way. Human rights organizations of all kinds in the West. For them to stop looking at their books and see what is happening on the ground. Such a dirty work was done by Gestapo policemen in concentration camps. The modern Ukrainian neo-Nazis try to imitate them in all the possible ways. They have the same symbols, Bandera, Shukhevich, the swastikas, SS symbols, wolf heads, and so on. Moreover, it seems that it's not enough for them, and they want to surpass their idols of the Third Reich in all the ways. And we have already mentioned the concentration camps created by the Ukrainian forces in the Russian border regions. In Kursk region, Oleshne settlement, and the Yunakovka settlement of the Sumy region, there are 2 such camps, and 101 1,000 people are kept there in inhumane conditions. These are Russian citizens, and the priests of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church are also taken there. The prisoners of those camps, created based on the image of German concentration camps, are subjected to physical and moral violence, and they have plans to use them as an exchange fund to return the Banderites that are kept prisoners of war and whose number is constantly growing. As our ombudsman Tatiana Maskalkova reported, at least 398 people died in Kursk, Bryansk, and Belgorod regions. 1,157 people were wounded, and more than 1,000 people have been forcefully taken out by the Ukrainian armed forces, and they are searched by their relatives and by their friends. And we agree with the human rights ombudsman of the Russian Federation, Tatiana Maskalkova, that these flagrant crimes of the Ukrainian army should be duly estimated. And now, regarding the crimes of the Kiev regime, the Russian Investigative Committee continues to sentence the Ukrainian and the criminals and the mercenaries. Yukhimchuk, commander of the Howitzer Artillery Division of the Azov Special Forces Unit of the National Ukrainian Guards, has been sentenced for life imprisonment as he ordered to shoot a civilian vehicle in Mariupol in April 2022. Now, 14 years and 6 months of imprisonment. Who do you think? It's Reed, who has already been sentenced in Russia. Do you remember what was his sentence? It was attack on policemen. It was 9 years ago in Moscow. And I would like to remind you that what the American officials said about that in the Department of State, for example. Back then, the Department of State was seriously concerned about the health and the conditions of imprisonment of Reed in Russia. And Jen Psaki, then the press secretary of the White House, stated that Ambassador Sullivan, U.S. ambassador in Russia, classified the court procedures against Reed as a mockery of justice. And I call upon the Russian authorities to immediately free Mr. Reed. And Reed was exchanged for Russian pilot Konstantin Yaroshenko, and maybe now the White House and the Department of State will remember their citizen and mention about their relations to opinions about his activities. Do they want to qualify to precise his international legal status, his activities in the conflict zone? Maybe they will honestly speak about support to him, his support to terrorists. We are looking forward to the American reaction on that. The DPR prosecutor's office sent to court the criminal cases of the citizens of Sweden and Moldova, Skilt and Gibadulin. Skilt participated in hostilities on behalf of the Azov regiment in 2014-2015, and since March 2022 up to March 2023, he fought for Ukrainian forces. Gibadulin participated in the conflict as part of Ukrainian forces since 2015, and he is on an international wanted list. Next one is American mercenary Bales, who participated within the mercenary group and Maluk has also been sentenced, who is the commissioner of the attack on the Crimean Bridge on the 17th of July 2023. Now about the assistance to Ukraine. The Western states call it assistance, but actually it's assistance in destruction of Ukraine. And France is fighting for the post of the leader in supporting the Ukrainian forces. Now, Paris has announced the transfer to Ukraine of its fighter jets Mirage 2000 that are constructed for striking the objects on the ground. Now, these planes, they are quite old, they are outdated, and the commander of the Ukrainian Air Forces, Ignat, in March 2023, said that neither Mirage nor Tornado will assist our Kyiv regime, and I call upon all the Ukrainian experts to abstain from those useless commentaries, those mirages. Just have a look at that Mirage 2000 and how it is better than MiG-29. That's end of quote. So France just dumped those outdated weapons to the Kyiv regime, including its F-16 fighter jets. Ukraine has been turned into not only a testing ground, but a dumping ground for the disposal of weapons whose maintenance requires resources. It's all done under the motto of borderless support to Kyiv regime. Actually, Ukraine and its people are cynically being used. Talking about France, by the way, there has recently been a publication in the French press about the Tuareg group and its cooperation with the Ukrainian special services. We have drawn attention to the connections of the Ukrainian forces with terror organizations. It's in the African continent, in the Middle East, in Russia. So does Kyiv regime hide it somehow? Vice versa, on the opposite, any terror attack against civilian infrastructure, against civilians, they just hail it as their achievement. It's mass recruitment of into the Ukrainian army of ISIS and Al-Qaeda members, interaction with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham terror organization, that's former Jabhat al-Nusra, that is illegal, that is prohibited in the Syrian province of Idlib, is unprecedented support to Islamists in ensuring the security of the Sahel region. The Kyiv regime representatives have openly claimed their support to terror groups in the Sahara-Sahel region. That was the reason of the authorities of Mali and Niger breaking the diplomatic ties with Ukraine and addressing the UN Security Council and accusing Ukraine of subversive activities in Africa. And it's the cooperation with Ukrainian special services with anti-government formation in Sahara-Sahel. It's not unexpected for us, but now it's a discovery, so to say, for the Western public. The transfer of first-person view technologies, that's the real-time coverage from the drone camera to monitor goggles and the helmet of a pilot. It's a flagrant and irresponsible destructive interference into African affairs. We are confident that another crime by Kyiv regime will be duly assessed from the legal point of view, and Mali is conducting an investigation of the Kyiv authorities' ties with extremists. Russia is regularly attacked by Ukrainian drones. Its civilian sites are attacked. We know very well how such interaction of Kiev with terror units, what it can lead to. It's Western methods, it's the instruments, as they say, bringing order according to American, NATO, Western rules, and we will uncompromisingly fight those manifestations and cooperate with friendly African states in ensuring security. Now, even today, I have mentioned the history, modern history. Let me do that one more. In the 14th of October, Ukraine marked the anniversary of the creation of the collaborationist Ukrainian insurgent army. It was created in 1942. Their human-hating nature, it's no secret for many people in the West. Just remember, in 2020, the CIA made public the archive documents, around 300 pages, testifying to the crimes of Stepan Bandera and his cooperation with the Hitlerites, including the German intelligence Abwehr service. So those were the Nazis, the murderers of humankind. And Bandera is named, it's a quote from the CIA documents, Ukrainian Nazi who in 5 weeks of the existence of his, so to say, state, with the militants of the Ukrainian insurgent army, destroyed around 5,000 Ukrainians, 15,000 Jews, and several thousand Poles. Is from the CIA materials published and available to those who need the truth, and for whom the truth is more valuable than anything else. Some more from history. 65 years ago, on the 15th of October 1959, Bandera, the mastermind of the Ukrainian insurgent army, was murdered, killed in Munich. It was done according to the decision of the Soviet Union, and Bandera was sentenced in absentia to death penalty. He was killed in Munich, and the Ukrainian Nazis and the Westerners assisting to them should study history better and follow the just decisions of the Russian legal authorities to punish those criminals. The plight of the Banderites is decided. They are doomed. They are doomed to suffer yet another crushing defeat. They are doomed for shame, lack of fame. And even now, when they have been glorified, they are just literally made look like saints. Bandera and Shukhevich, all those attempts of reincarnations are doomed to failure. All those useless activities about the whitening of the names shaded with blood has led to even worse consequences. It has turned those who tried to return to the historical pantheon and their heroes to the abyss of turning themselves into terrorists. Regarding the glorification of the Ukrainian insurgent army, it's indicative of the true, so to say, mutual understanding with Poland. It's the Volyn massacre of 1943-1944. What is that? It's a mass murder of the Banderites of tens of thousands of Poles. It's frequently mentioned in the media. The proposals made by Ukraine to settle this historical problem. How can it be settled? There is just one way out: to admit that Bandera, Shukhevich, all that Ukrainian insurgent army, and all those criminal organizations created under the Third Reich, to admit they are Nazis, they are collaborators. They are the followers of the Nazi human-hating ideology. There is no way out, another way out from this situation. But now, when the ideology of the Kiev regime, the strategy of the collective West, when it falls, turns into dust and disappears, because that's the support, the pillars of that. Those who now demonstrate swastikas in Ukraine are the descendants of, as they say, great Ukrainians who have fought for their national identity, and they are nurtured from those historical moments. And when someone finds forces in the West, someone's strength to read the resolutions of the Nuremberg Tribunal, the documents of that time, admitting that Bandera and Shukhevich were Nazi collaborators, Hitlerites, everything will be destroyed. It will just go as smoke, as a mist. And of course the Kiev regime, it insists, and Warsaw can do nothing with that. Kiev does not even want to hear about exhumation of the bodies of the victims of the Volyn tragedy. And Warsaw threatens with the blockade of the Ukraine accession into the European Union. And Kondratchuk has added fuel by saying that the militants of the Ukrainian insurgent army in Poland should be the first stage in order to create a monument to the victims of the Volyn massacre. So the Poles, they should erect a monument to those who killed them, who raped, who made fire to their houses. So you think that we will like it, you don't like it, but you think that we should put up with the monuments of our heroes being destroyed, and monuments to anti-heroes being erected at their place, those who had killed us, who had destroyed our ethnicity, our people and our country. So it's just the manifestation of gratitude from Kiev for the assistance of allies in anti-Russian coalition, as they call it now. It's a testimony of the lack of punishment and admissiveness that Zelensky has just got accustomed from the West, and Washington and London has allowed that. Now you need to just treat your enfant terrible, the monster you have nurtured.
There are some things that are just unfathomable. A paragon of bravery. A piece of news went viral about a resident from Odessa, Yelena Chesakova. Maybe you watched it. On October the 7th, she hosted a Russian flag on a spot where a monument to Catherine the Great used to be. She tried to give an honest assessment to the conflict in Ukraine. She was detained by police. She said that she would never accept apologies given by Ukrainian Nazis for their bloody crimes. She expressed support for the Russian world and Russia. She said that US and NATO were to blame for this fratricidal conflict. And she called on sane Ukrainian militants to lay down their arms for her civil stance. She was detained and arrested. She will be dealt with. You can rest assured. That's anti-fascism. Yes, it is. 1930s, 1940s, anti-fascists gave their lives, not their security, but their lives, to protest. It's so hard to speak about it without emotions. Once you realize that a single woman can do something that will become a feat, a heroic act. Anti-fascists uniting efforts or acting single-handedly did not really protest. No, they actually stood in the way of this Nazi and fascist machine. They knew what awaits them. It was their conscious choice. But they knew also that there could have been nobody other than them who can do that. It's not for the Red Army. It's not for the Soviet Union. They were calling out the names of their peoples, of their countries. They were doing it for the benefit of the children and the grandchildren who would live in the countries. They knew that Nazism infects their houses first and foremost. I don't know what fate awaits Miss Zakharova. We'll pray for her. We'll do our utmost to call upon international community to draw attention, to pay attention to people opposing the collective West by acting single-handedly, by understanding what it will lead to. This Russian flag was raised at a spot where a historical injustice was committed. A monument was demolished to a person who founded this very city, Odessa. It's a point which concentrates the whole protest, the pain of dehumanizing and trampling underfoot of the truth that we are now observing in Ukraine. It's a place of power where anybody, a representative of any nation, can start seeing clearly. We call upon all international legal structures to pay particular attention to the situation around Ms. Zakharova. All the aforementioned facts confirm the relevance of this special military operation to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine and impede the threats from Ukraine. We said that those goals will be reached. Now, over to the situation in Moldova. NATO troops are trying to take freedom and independence from Moldovans. On October 12th, 20th, elections of president and a referendum to join the EU will be held. Moldovan experts already evaluated the Sandu regime actions. They called it a totalitarian theater of absurdity. There were no positive results of the Sandu regime over the last 4 years. They only rely on administrative resource, repressions against political opponents, independent media, and all dissenters. On October 9th, the police confiscated unfoundedly the printing propaganda materials from the printing house of the Party of Communists of the Republic of Moldova. Is this party publishing some kind of a forbidden materials? No. On October 13th, the same fate befell a batch of newspapers of the political formation, the Revival Party. The aforementioned media just shared their own stance regarding the developments. They said that Moldavia does not need to join the European Union, but their fate is already decided. On October 10th, Moldovan users could not access Telegram channels of a number of opposition leaders from the national parliament, the head of Gagauzi, Evgenia Gutsul, and a couple of Moldovan media. On October 11th, it became known that 7 accounts were deleted on Facebook and Instagram. They were spreading forbidden information. 23 pages, 20 accounts that contain the criticism of the current president and calls to vote against Euro integration. The West, talking about independence and freedom of Moldova, that's the same West who was saying that it's okay to call on others to kill Russians. So these are the values they want to impart. At the same time, they do not block clearly extremist accounts with messages calling to kill people. And instead they're blocking alternative opinion channels. They do not call upon any violence or killings. That's just ridiculous. The OSCE, ODIHR, couldn't look the other way on gross violations on election rights. In Russia, there were only a limited number of polling stations. Some candidates were denied the registration. So these are some blurry evaluations, but the ODIHR is absolutely biased. We can say that, but even they said the truth, even some of it. Anti-ratings of Sandy are at a record high level. It's an anti-rating. And Western sponsors of the Chisinau regime are forced to scale up their unconcealed interference in internal matters of Moldova to help their protégés. What are they doing? Well, they were given free money and are doing anti-Russian statements. On October 9th, the European Parliament adopted a Russophobic resolution strengthening Moldova's resilience against Russian interference ahead of the upcoming presidential elections and a constitutional referendum on EU integration. The so-called European deputies called on imposing sanctions against undermining Moldovan sovereignty. Who is undermining the Moldovan sovereignty? Maybe those who are calling Moldovans Romanians. Maybe those people who are saying there is no Moldovan language, that only the Romanian language exists. Well, for some reason, these people were not listed. We're talking about the Moldovan opposition, who is in favor of preservation of culture, traditions, and justice in Moldova. European deputies are calling to deploy additional consultants to provide technical aid to join the European Union and to scale up the support for the Strategic Communications Center. Remember the Ministry of Truth? That was it. Ursula von der Leyen voiced her stance in favor of Maya Stansu. I'm just curious, did she send a postcard with congratulatory marks to Sanda when Hollande sent? Remember, Hollande sent his congratulatory remarks to Clinton. She didn't even win the elections yet. There was a plan for growth for Moldova. The most part of this growth plan is supposed to be a loan. That's a considerable amount, 1.8 billion euros. But, there is a but. For some reason, it goes unnoticed by everyone. That's a loan. It's not a gift. It's not a humanitarian aid. It's not a free support. It's a credit. Who's going to pay it off? Using what money? Who's going to use this money? To what ends? Oh, that's not important. Important is to give some beautiful figure and just keep silence. That's a credit, not a gift. That's the interference, the Western interference into internal affairs of Moldova. The EU Council imposed sanctions for efforts to destabilize the situation in Moldova on October 4th against 5 individuals and entities, including the head of Gagauza, Evgeny Gutsul, the founder of Eurasia Autonomous Nonprofit Organization, Nelly Peruchenko, and the organization itself. It's noteworthy that the West is revealing its true interests, its genuine interests regarding Moldova. The EU ambassador in Chisinau, Yanis Mazekis, said recently that as a result of Euro integration of Moldova, Western transnational corporations will have a right, you might think, to help the Moldovan business or will help to invest into the Moldovan economy, is also what you might think, or maybe to support Moldovan startups for free. No, that's not the case. Western transnational corporations, he said, will receive the right to buy up the country's land fund. Well, the end of the show. Fascists couldn't do it, and Nazis couldn't do it 80 years ago. They tried to occupy and subdue lands. They were thinking that that was their land for good, but then they just stole good agricultural soil from the Slavic peoples. Now it's being done by transnational corporations. Well, somebody can say they'll buy it, pay money for it. Well, we know how they are buying it. It will all be replaced with a different rhetoric. They'll say Moldova past the deadline, is late on her deadline to pay off. There's no opportunity to pay for the lands. Well, they won't have to pay for the lands. That's a real yoke. That's a colonization of Moldova. It's neo-colonialism. It's horrible. That's slavery. But in new 21st century style slavery. They used to give mirrors to Aboriginals, but now, instead of doing that, they're giving Moldovans some slips of papers with numbers, and they are taking lands from Moldovans. Moldova is an agricultural land, an agricultural country. That's the most valuable thing there. On October 8th, Romanian European parliamentarian Claudiu Târziu said that Moldova can join the European Union only if it exits the CIS, de-Russifies the country, and demolishes all Soviet monuments. So what are those monuments? First, the monuments to the heroes of the Great Patriotic War, the Second World War, people who fought against fascism and Nazism. Secondly, monuments to prominent figures of culture, science, art. We're talking about our joint heroes and Moldovan heroes. The West wants to erase Moldovan identity, to make Moldovan children forget their national heroes, people who contributed to victory, who forged the victory and brought wealth to this country, were successful in art, culture, and science. And thirdly, monuments that were erected to commemorate friendship, peace, which were priorities of the Moldovan people. European parliamentarian. That's what Mr. Târziu calls himself. Well, one of the pro-Brun Party Moldovan propaganda worker said recently that Sanda needs victory to preserve, to keep Moldova as an important logistics hub to supply Ukraine. Well, not surprising. It's just a spot on the map to implement the geopolitical aspirations of the West. The West wouldn't be the West if it weren't to pay money to Moldova. They are used to using others for their ends. It's done at the expense of Moldovans. Let me reiterate it. It's credits, and they will be paid off by future generations. They are at a direct dependence from the money that Maya Sandu will receive, and she will steal all that money. The IMF estimates that the state debt has risen $330 million from January to June 2024. The negative trade balance amounted to $3 billion. That's the real outcomes of the policy of the current authorities. Their policy to break with Russia and other CIS countries. And I hope the Moldovan people understand what the West is leading the Moldovan people to. It's not for the first time that the West is trying to cover up its policies with unscrupulous maneuvers. The West started this within the framework of the Indo-Pacific strategy. Its aim is to reduce the functionality of multilateral ASEAN-centered structures. This also applies to the situation that is taking shape today around the work of the East Asia Summit, EAS, shortly. This mechanism, since its inception in 2005, focused on inclusive and practical cooperations of ASEAN and dialogue partners. Initially, its basic sectoral areas were identified as economy, energy, environment, health, finances, emergency reports. EAS applied a paper which was extended significantly in 2017 with a Manila Plan of Action. It's a roadmap which included connectivity and food security. To enhance the practical impact of the forum, a special group of permanent representatives of EAS member states to ASEAN was formed, whose responsibilities include the implementation of leadership decisions. This line policy of ASEAN partners, with the active support of Russia and China, allowed in the period until 2021 to develop and adopt a whole range of documents important from the point of view of intensifying regional cooperation on sustainable development agenda and in responding to transboundary problems and challenges. The pro-NATO quartet, Asia-Pacific Quartet, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, within their Indo-Pacific policy, aimed at reformatting the cooperative landscape in the Asia-Pacific region, according to the bloc models and standards, began to systematically obstruct the productive work of the EAS platform. 2020, at the height of the COVID pandemic, we had a paradoxical situation. This quartet tried to do everything to edit out everything proposed by Russia.
As they said, it was in order to increase the regional anti-pandemic potential of the region. It was back in 2020. After 2022, they provided the arguments of the alleged aggression of Russia. But what was it back in 2020? What was the reason of putting obstacles back then? It's the nature of the West. The declaration was eventually adopted. However, up to nowadays, its work is stopped by the West. They refuse to work on the implementation of this document. The similar fate has reached the document agreed on in 2021. The document on interaction in tourism is one of the instruments of artificial stifling of negative economic consequences of the pandemics. The Russian experts launched expert contacts and ministerial dialogue in this area. All that is put on the back burner from year to year, blocked systematically. And the apex was the destructive behavior of the West in 2022. It was at the last minute blocked the declaration on promoting volunteerism. Why did the West not favor volunteerism? And also the development of energy cooperation with China and others is just two examples cited by me. With no less enthusiasm, the Western group in 2023 criticized the Russian proposal on the EAS plan of action for 2024-2028 and the review of the consequences of the leaders' decisions. It was 44 documents in that list. Why was it needed? What was the reason? In order to determine the next steps to implement these decisions, but all that met obstacles posed by the West and the lack of desire to work together to cooperate normally. The EIS was made a platform for propaganda of narratives, ideological narratives, as they say, of a rules-based order. And the US satellites are trying to transfer that into the ASEAN alternative, America-centered, narrowly block mechanisms and partnerships. Now there are more than 10 of them. This year, Russia, at the stages of preparations to the summit, protected the practical significance of the EIS. We supported the Lao chairmanship draft, and we called upon the members not to make it to put obstacles due to geopolitical ambitions. We were concentrated on cooperation, but the Westerners just led down the path of politicization. They refused compromise and continued that confrontational speeches, conditioning that adoption on their confrontational content. And so they just disrupted its adoption. And the Russian delegation had to present the issue of the obstacles made by the negotiation teams of the United States within the EIS. There were two Russian major initiatives based on the Russian experience and international cooperation within the SCO and APEC. We have proposed to study the themes of distant territories and the concepts of interconnectivity in the region. We have seen the publications that have appeared at the behest of the Westerners, of course, that Russia is disrupting the EIS work, acting in an inconstructive manner, not cooperating, but I have cited the actual facts based on the data of our experts that testify on who actually puts obstacles to this structure. Some more issues from the life of the exceptional and their proteges. From the 30th of September until the 11th of October, Poland, there was the so-called Warsaw Conference on Human Dimension. By the way, it's a good question. What is a human dimension? In the OSCE understanding, this is a term for the set of norms connected with the human rights, the democracy that is considered within the OSCE in line with other dimensions, like political and economical. So why do we need such terms that are distant from the human dimension? It's the event organized for the third time in a row. It's an illegitimate substitution to the consensus in human dimension. The official Russian delegations is in solidarity with in some other countries and is boycotting this meeting. However, some Russian representatives of civil society, they participate and they want to convey to the international audience the point of view that is alternative to the official Russian point of view. And the ODIHR headquarters is located in Poland, and it hosts key OSCE human rights events. So the West just thinks that it's some center of democratic traditions and procedures. These are lists, sanctions lists, refusals to issue visas, hour-long delays, and the interrogations also at airports. So there are clear rules that the host country should provide unhindered access to its territory to all the participants on non-discriminatory basis. This year, official Warsaw refused to issue visas to the chairperson of the International Peacebuilding Movement Women's Dialogue, Yelena Semerikova, and her colleague. It is some revenge for her bright, sharp, and truthful speech last year. Yelena Semerikova is linked to this country in many ways. Her mother is a native Pole. She fought on the territory of Poland, liberating it from the Nazis. She maintains links with many Polish non-governmental organizations, but it does not play any role from the point of view of Warsaw. She has not been issued a visa. So it's a blatant hypocrisy by Poland that on the platform of the OSCE just states its adherence to the democratic principles. So they are just extreme in that, and for them just being manifesting their protection of human rights. So the right of speech is allowed to the figures who are recognized in some OSCE countries as extremists. So, and if there are some people who have the opinion that is not favorable for Warsaw, they are just not allowed to the event. It's obvious that in Poland they do not want to listen to the truth. Maybe not only in Poland. It's maybe not only the responsibility of Warsaw. They do not want to hear the truth about such serious problems in the OEC as glorification of Nazism, attacks against Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and the Russian-speaking population in Ukraine, and the Russian-speaking population in the Baltic states. So we think that Poland should be deprived of this title of the host country of international structures and OEC events. And Russia supports the ODIHR transfer of headquarters, and it's asking whether they are ready for their immediate interests to lead this organization into the abyss. So one more example of the supporters of democracy in Norway, in accordance with the requirements of the Norwegian authorities, the ambassador of Russia in Norway has to cut the number of diplomatic staff in Norway starting from the 17th of October. So it has already been harmed by the extraditions in 2022 and 2023. New ultimate requirements by Oslo aggravate the work of Russian consular offices in Norway, and that's the aim of those decisions. They just paralyze the activities of our consular posts in some areas. They will continue work in Oslo in with restricted staff numbers, and the consular generals in Kirkenes and Barentsburg will have to suspend their activities. So the consular posts will renew their work as soon as the algorithm of work in new conditions is developed, and we advise Russian citizens to follow the information on the information resources of Russian embassy and Russian consular offices. We will provide the response measures that would be sensitive to the Norwegian side. Italy has also acted in an unfriendly way recently. The 75th International Astronautical Congress takes place in Milan from the 14th to 18th of October. It unites annually more than 5,000 participants, heads of space agencies, astronauts, scientists, and specialists from many countries. The Roscosmos State Corporation and the rocket and space industry have been permanent members of the Federation since 1993. They annually transferred membership fees to the organization's budget. Russian representatives have been repeatedly elected to governing bodies of the Federation. Representative of the Russian delegation, headed by the Director General of Roscosmos, Yuri Borisov, intended to participate in the Milan Congress. There were officials' invitations from the International Astronaut Federation, its US citizen. However, he acted within the framework of the norms and rules within the Federation. They also got invitations from the Italian Space Agency. Despite that, despite any financial debts or any other debts, despite meeting all the necessary formalities, including the payment of participation fees, flight and accommodation fees, what do you think? The Italian government did not issue visas to the Russian delegates. I understand that Italy is a great space powerhouse, and it can compensate to the Russian delegation absence. However, someone will argue that. But just think, if Russia, our country, that has provided invaluable input to the discovery of outer space. And for decades, it has provided highly valuable input. And it was the first one that just touched the outer space. It has proclaimed it not the zone of conflict or unfriendly competition, just the zone for discovery. So if Italy not allowing our country to conferences, to events on space, who will suffer from that? So our achievements in outer space, they just do not need advertisements. And Russia is sharing those achievements with all other countries that do not have such capacities, such space capacities to deliver astronauts or cargoes in space, and do not have a possibility to create a space station, do not have such capacities, cannot provide their own pilots and astronauts for flights, for trips with different aims into space. Russia is assisting everyone. It is ready to provide astronauts from all over the world, and astronauts from all over the world have profited from it for decades, and it's just harmful for them, and they look silly. So it's just a shame for Rome to do that. The Italian side has again flagrantly disregarded the obligations of the country, host country, for major international event. We think it's an unlawful decision and another manifestation of a Russophobic policy of the current officials in Italy. It's contrary to the goals and objectives of the Federation and undermines the basis of the international cooperation, and is a blow to peaceful space exploration and Russian-Italian relations that are in the crisis deepest from the moment of the Second World War. And it just contradicts the holding of international events in Russia. In 2021 in St. Petersburg, there was the Global Space Exploration Conference organized by Roscosmos and the International Astronautical Federation. Despite COVID-19 restrictions, our country fully met its obligations on the visa issuance, its obligations before the international participants of the conference. And I would remember there were so many limits in the world back then for crossing borders by the people. We met all our obligations. Now the official Rome has confirmed just some its unscrupulous methods are just detrimental to itself. So let them just study the history of and these are just unilateral destructive steps. They're just favorable to Washington. There are no other motives visible here. And Washington needs that in order not to allow somewhere some manifestations, obvious manifestations of the multipolar world being formed. The West needs that in order to hold the Western-centered world order that is just disappearing. It's the order that is based on the right of the strong. One more issue. We draw attention to the rhetoric of the official Tokyo about the nuclear and missile threats that allegedly are posed by North Korea. It was expressed by Shigeru Ishiba, Japanese Prime Minister, in the East Asia Summit in Vientiane on the 11th of October. We cannot ignore the presentation by the Japanese Prime Minister of his own concept of the, he called it Asian NATO model. He said that members of such an organization should have access to US nuclear weapon in the format of, he said, joint nuclear missions and to deploy it on their own territory. So maybe the Prime Minister, he is new to his post. Maybe he has not been told. I will just tell it. Even when the United States deploy their nuclear weapons on the territory of other countries, they do not give access to anyone to it in any kind. It's just information for the Japanese authorities.
The Prime Minister said, and I quote, his intention to knot ropes crosswise to get a kind of a net. He was commenting on prospects of implementation of such an alliance. Maybe it's a pit for them. Does Japan even think one step ahead? Do they know what is going to happen if Americans will deploy their weapons in Japan? What it will lead to? To greater security, to B, and that's the right answer, to the destruction of the stability in this long-suffering region. In line with the cardinal remilitarization, Japan continues at an accelerated pace to expand its military and political cooperation with Washington, to shape strike capability of offensive character, and to scale up military and training activity with extra-regional forces of NATO. They call the situation around the Korean Peninsula. They blame North Korea in escalation around the Korean Peninsula. Well, it's like a stop the thief, remember this? I would like to warn Japan. When you start to knot ropes, make sure you do not get stifled by this rope yourself. Now, the October 25th, October 26th, on Samoa, there will be the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. It can have dire consequences for London. 15 CARICOM member states used to be centers of plantation farming and slave trade of the British Empire. They now intend to require from London a payment of reparations to the tune of $260 billion for centuries of slavery. That's not the final sum. If Britain says no, CARICOM states would like to file a lawsuit. This idea to require reparation for slavery and exploitation, which remains the considerable problem, has been discussed lately a lot. Just and persistent demands of Caribbean states, the calls for compensations now get specific outlines. During the opening of a regular session of the UN General Assembly in September this year, Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, speaking on behalf of CARICOM, called to complete the unfinished work and solve the issue with reparations for slavery colonialism. She multiple times noted that the debt is $5 trillion, the debt of the Great Britain. We might recall that Britain has not participated in interference of internal matters of only 22 countries recognized by the UN. The expansion of the British Empire encompassed all regions of the world. The British drained the resources, used these countries as raw material appendages and markets for their industrial goods, and they traded slaves. On the slave trade markets, you cannot use this terminology even. It sounds savage. In Latin America, they can show you places where they traded slaves. Where? To the United States. Obvious. Britain, Europe, the Anglo-Saxon world, first and foremost. Today, there are 10 the so-called non-self-governing territories that Britain holds. It's Anguilla, Bermuda, the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, Montserrat, the Turks and Caicos Islands. In early October, after a long territorial dispute, there was an agreement with Britain to return the Chagos archipelago under the sovereignty of Mauritius. Well, one should be glad, you say, but Diego Garcia Island is still under the administration of Britain and US for the next 99 years. The British conducted its colonial policy with cruelty, and it's recorded very well. The colonial machine of Britain literally butchered millions of people on different continents. One has proof to talk about the responsibility of British for the genocide with regards to peoples of the world. They are cowardly trying to avoid responsibility for their crimes. London is now working to destroy archival materials to make it harder to evaluate the scale of their criminal activities. The colonial period, at the behest of the elites, still remains to a great extent a factor of national pride. The specific system of values has firmly rooted this ideology of messiahship, so quote-unquote, and the heavy burden of a white person, which is the source of progress, quote-unquote, for the whole world. London cannot continue to indefinitely suppress the independence and sovereignty of peoples. Russia supports the countries of the Caribbean in their aspiration to get a just compensation from Britain for past and current dire consequences caused by colonization and neocolonialism. That's a very heavy burden experienced by those peoples. It's not suppression, it's violence, exploitation. It's not that they don't respect their rights. It's that it's removed the category of rights from those people. I'd like to note that the USSR played an important role in decolonization, consistently advocated against the policy of neocolonialism in the Caribbean. In the second half of the 1950s, the Soviet policy was aimed at supporting national liberation movements of colonial peoples and cooperation with new independent states. The USSR became the initiator of the Declaration on the Granting of the Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples. It was adopted on December 14th, 1960, during the 15th UN General Assembly session, Resolution 1514. The Special Committee on Decolonization was created, C24 it's called, and Russia is the member of this committee until this day, still. And the USSR efforts in this regard allowed the UN to play an important role in achieving independence from colonial powers of these nations. Washington and London conduct a policy to restore the ideological neo-colonial policy in the spirit of the Monroe Doctrine. Russia but small Caribbean states are trying to protect their sovereignty, their independent way of development, and Russia encourages them to do so. Let's now move to the UN. On October 24th, the global community will celebrate United Nations Day. On this day, in 1945, the UN Charter came into force. It became the cornerstone of international law, and fundamental principles of interstate communications were enshrined there: sovereign equality, non-interference in the internal affairs, and self-determination of peoples. These norms passed the test of time and serve as a foundation for ensuring harmonious coexistence of all countries. Today, the humankind is facing an expanding range of challenges, but to react effectively, we need joint efforts. We now see a shaping of new multipolar world, shift of the center of political and economic influence to Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Against this backdrop, the relevance of the UN is increasing and should increase, but only if the United Nations would continue to be the slave of the West. Only a world organization that has a universal legitimacy, unique competency, and vast toolkit can play a coordinating role in joint decisions on pressing issues. If the United Nations would not betray itself, we should say the UN find it's harder and harder to live up to its lofty mission. The collective West is to blame. They are trying to take hostage the organization to promote their biased narratives, to conduct high-profile PR actions, to please the internal audience. They are trying to exert pressure on so-called inconvenient countries. General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, Security Council, other UN bodies don't use their potential as needed. It's wasted often. The trust of the UN is undermined by the Western Secretariat, occupied by Westerners. It's the Article 100 of the Charter is often neglected. It prescribes to act impartially, not to give in to the short-minded agenda. Russia is a founding member of the UN, the permanent member of the Security Council. We are clearly aware of the responsibility for the future of this organization. We are going to work with our like-minded countries from the global majority to uphold the fundamental principles of its functionality, to guard the international legal norms in their entirety and interconnectedness, to block unilateral initiatives, to reform the UN, and we're going to hinder attempts to put its service, to put their service at the golden million. We celebrated the 60th anniversary of the Druzhba pipeline, the largest pipeline system. It was built by the U.S. to transport oil to Hungary, Poland, Czechoslovakia. Over the last 60 years, it was used as an energy bridge to ensure mutually beneficial cooperation, to ensure energy security. Western countries unfoundedly blamed our country, but we are still a solid supplier of energy resources. You have another testament before your eyes. In mid-July, Ukraine, the Kiev regime, at the behest of its Western masters, stopped the transit supplies of Lukoil oil on the southern branch of this pipeline to Slovakia and Hungary. It was a politically motivated act. Russian companies helped, supported, and the Tatneft company scaled up its supplies to Slovakia and Hungary and sent more than 330,000 tons of oil to each of the country. Lukoil is not to blame for it, but now we can guarantee the functionality of the system. This is the setting where we are celebrating the anniversary, the 60 years of this unique infrastructure project, the Druzhba pipeline. We actually are supposed to have a solemn ceremony. We should award veterans who gave their life for this project to thrive, to praise those people who are now working to maintain its functionality. We should grant stipends, money, and to do it together. I'm talking about an international joint event. But instead of this, the West is using others as proxies to achieve their goals. On October 24th, Zambia celebrates the Independence Day. We greatly appreciate the traditionally friendly character of Russia-Zambia relations. Mutual respect, mutual interests, we value them. Moscow and Lusaka support the political dialogue and cooperate on the international stage, trade, economy, education, culture, humanitarian sphere. On October 30th, a start was given to the strengthening of friendship ties and cooperation between our countries. The USSR was the first country to recognize the independence of this young republic. The US and the Russian Federation have always supported this country and the Zambian people. We are extending our congratulatory remarks to our Zambian friends with this remarkable date, and we wish the Zambian people wealth and prosperity and all the best. Now let's move to the Great Patriotic War. "80 years ago, the October 20th, 1944, the Balkans, the Red Army and Yugoslav partisans liberated Belgrade. The Nazi Germany lost its allies, Romania and Bulgaria, which ensured a rapid advance of the troops of the Third Ukrainian Front, led by Marshal Fyodor Tulbuchin, to Yugoslavia. Soviet troops destroyed the German army group Serbia, inflicted serious damage to other formations of Army Group F, liberated eastern and northeastern areas of Yugoslavia. Thus, they created favorable conditions for the retreat, for the advance of the Red Army towards Budapest. The First Army Group, led by Peko Dapčević, also helped to destroy German fascists. The Yugoslavian people highly appreciated the feat of their liberators. They commended them for courage and bravery shown in the battles. More than 2,000 Soviet soldiers and officers were awarded medals and orders. 13 people became Peoples of Heroes of Yugoslavia. 300 combatants and commanders of the People's Liberation Army of Yugoslavia were also awarded medals. October the 20th, it's a very remarkable date that unites Russia and Serbia. We will have events with guests from our country, from Serbia. The ceremony will include the laying of wreaths at the cemetery to the liberators of Belgrade. The Immortal Regiment will also be held, and in the evening, there will be a solemn meeting at the People's Theater and Festive Fireworks. The Russian Ministry of Culture and the Russian Military Historical Society opened thematical exhibitions in the Belgrade Central Park and the Russian Center for Science and Culture. On the eve of the anniversary of the estate, We would like to extend our gratitude to the authorities and people of Serbia for paying respect to the memory of the fallen. 49 Russian military graves from the Second World War are being preserved in the country. Unlike examples of Eastern Europe, who turned the mass grave into hotbeds of vandalism, we are convinced that our common memory, who defeated the Hitlerite Germany, will serve as a good foundation of the friendship between Russia and Serbia. 80 years ago, October 25th, 1944, the final stage of the Petsamo-Kirkenes offensive. Eastern Finnmark, north and east of Norway, to the Tana River, was liberated. Every day, we remember the feat of the Soviet troops, combatants of the Norwegian soil. We pay tribute to the memory of the fallen heroes. During this offensive, the Red Army lost 6,084 people. In Norway, in German concentration camps, and those are horrible places. You cannot even imagine what labor camps were like. 12,678 Soviet POWs died. In 1952, in appreciation for the liberation, in the center of Kirkenes, a memorial to the Soviet soldier was erected. Russe Monumentet, the Russian monument it's called. The pedestal bears the inscription in Russian and Norwegian.
The brave Soviet soldiers, the inscription reads, in memory of the liberation of Kirkenes in 1944. According to the archive data, the residential premises, the warehouses and other trophy property were handed to the local population by the Soviet army. And the supply of volunteer formations of the Norwegian army was organized. Weapons and food were supplied, and the Soviet troops restored infrastructure and cooperated in restoration of peaceful life of the Norwegian population. On the 17th of October 1945, the Norwegian Prime Minister Einar Gerhardsen wrote to Joseph Stalin, "The people of the Red Army strengthened the friendship between our two countries, and they left behind the feelings of gratitude and admiration in the Norwegian people for the great Soviet people." End of quote. Håkon VII, the King of Norway, also noted that the war was won by the Red Army on the Eastern Front. It was this victory that led to the liberation of Norwegian territory in the north. End of quote. And gratitude to the Soviet warriors in Oslo was expressed by King of Norway Harald V in Kirkenes in October 2019. "Norway is grateful to you. These words are enshrined in the stone." End of quote. It is with sorrow that we observe that the leadership of Norway turns our common history into some distortion, and we just observe it with disgust. They are trying to ignore the merits of those who fought for liberation of the people, and they divide the monuments into right and not right and call for their demolition. We have repeatedly stated that we do not have our victory and someone else's victory. It's victory common for everyone. We will always remember the feats of the liberators and those who participated in the convoys in the Barents Sea, and the residents of Norway who helped the Soviet prisoners of war in concentration camps and fought together with the Russian army on their own soil. And Petsamo-Kirkenes offensive operation will remain forever as a symbol of heroism of bravery of Soviet soldiers. And as a result of this operation, threats were eliminated to Murmansk and the Northern Sea route. There were commemorative cards by Marka issued for the 80th anniversary of the liberation of northern Norway by Soviet troops during the Petsamo-Kirkenes operation. And one more issue: in September 1944, the Soviet troops crossed the Hungarian border, and during October they occupied 1/3 of Hungarian territory. On the 29th of October 1944, the Budapest offensive operation was started with the forces of the 2nd and the 3rd Ukrainian fronts. By going into offensive on the 29th of October, the Soviet troops on the 2nd of November approached Budapest, but they could not capture the city, and Hitler was determined to hold the Hungarian capital. On the 26th of December, the Soviet troops presented the ultimatum on capitulation that was declined by the pro-German forces of the country. During bloody combat on the 18th of January 1945, the Red Army captured Pest, on the 13th of February, the Buda district. And as a result of the Budapest offensive, all the targets were fulfilled, and the enemy had to speed up his withdrawal from Yugoslavia. And in memory of this event, in June 1945, a medal was established for the capture of Budapest, and it was awarded to 362,000 people. One more announcement. On many occasions we inform about the significant events. It's Shum Youth Forum that is to be held in the Kaliningrad region. Its aim is to assist to the implementation of promising projects and assist in employment. Projects are created in the 4 specialized sessions. Each has its target audience, its specifics. One of them is Shum, Journalism Industry 5.0. It will start in Kaliningrad on the 26th of October and be held until the 1st of November. It's for young specialists aged from 18 to 35. It will be attended by journalists from more than 80 countries. The participants will hone their skills in creating photo and video projects, exchange experiences between journalists, and it will be experience exchange between journalists, media experts, and contribute to professional development of the participants. All those who will participate in that event, they are working on tasks that are provided by consumers, by companies, organizations that are active in the market. So it's about real-life collaboration, and it leads to job contracts, to employment, and to long-term cooperation. So I think it's more than valuable in today's world.